All right, welcome to the Detroit Lions News Podcast. Obviously, if you're just seeing the news, it's an hour after the news dropped. I wanted to put a quick video out there on my thoughts about Terrion Arnold getting released from the Detroit Lions because significantly this will hurt the Detroit Lions in terms of their 2026 team. Now, when I did the cornerback breakdown yesterday, I graded him a 78. And that was because Terrion Arnold's legal crisis. And if he would have been, you know, in the lineup or been able to be cornerback number two, AJ Reed being cornerback number one, it might have bolted it up to maybe a B minus. But with Terrion Arnold having the situation that he had, the bond hearing, which was theatrical at best, it was pretty entertaining to watch and to see all the commentary from all the Lions people that are content creators and all that talking about the attorney and all that jazz. The reality is it doesn't matter to the Detroit Lions because they released Terrion Arnold. And it begs the question, 2024 draft class looking a little bit bleak. Obviously Christian Mahogany could change that. Giovanni Manu, if he's serviceable, could change that. Ennis Rakestraw can change that. But for the most part, Ennis Rakestraw hasn't stayed healthy. I think he's only played in 26 games. And I forget what kind of snaps he had yesterday, but it's a difficult position for the Detroit Lions to be in. And now you're going to rely your depth. Rocky Sin is probably going to get the cornerback 2 job. Maybe Ennis Rakestraw, maybe Keith Abney will come. He'll come out and show out. Maybe McCreary gets this cornerback number 2 job. But from the Detroit Lions perspective, they felt like this couldn't go on. And from my perspective, I kind of look at it like this. What did they know, or what did the league tell them? Because that is the most interesting thing about a lot of people talk about what happens behind closed doors. For a fact that someone was talking to someone, they're like, look, he's not going to play. The commissioner's going to put him on the exempt list. And Detroit releasing him, I believe, is maybe they were fed something where they can recoup the money back. That's the way this thing works. So, and when you look at, guys that are still available on the free agent list, like you got guys like Rasul Douglas, Kenny Moore, who I'd be interested in. You got guys like Adoree Jackson. There's some guys out there, but it's very few and far between. Very far and few between. It sucks for the Detroit Lions because you thought Terrion Arnold was going to be a key piece to your future. He is no longer with the team. And, yesterday when we were doing the cornerback breakdown and we finished, I was like, look, I don't know what Terrion could eventually be. I don't know, what this legal crisis is going to do. I do know that when he first came in the league, I had a little bit of a suspicion that he'd be a pretty good player. Especially when you watched him at Alabama, you thought he'd be a really good player if he just cleaned some things up. Every prospect that you draft, it's not a exact science. Like no matter what someone tells you, no matter what someone, their draft or what they think about a player, everybody on planet Earth misses on players. Like, for instance, I didn't think Cooper DeJean would be this great, but he's great. I didn't think, Ennis Rakestraw would be as injured as he has been. I thought he was going to be pretty good. Way back in the day, I thought Amir Abdullah would be a great running back for Detroit. I mean, he stayed in the league a long time, but you get the point. Like sometimes everyone's going to go on Brett Holmes for the 2024 draft. You're not going to be 100%. If you look at like the 21 draft, 22 draft, 23 draft, those are great drafts. And so when you have one bad class, it sets you back a little bit, and you could see the setback of the 2024 class, and you got to make up ground on it now. And a lot of teams fail with one draft class. Are they 2 draft classes? There's 3 draft classes. That's how it goes. And the best GMs have 1. Maybe 2 if they're long in their tenure. Like Howie Roseman, I think he had 2 years where it was brutal if you go back and look. And He turned it around. Same with Les Snead. He had a couple years where his drafts, even though he didn't have a lot of picks, a little sketchy. You go down the line, Beach. If you go down the line, Schneider. Like all these GMs, especially when you're picking later in the first round, that's when you get yourself into trouble. But with Terrion Arnold, I thought he was going to be a really good player for Detroit. He didn't end up being. He didn't clean up the penalties. He didn't clean up the grabbing. You thought, yeah, if you watch Alabama, he was a little handsy, but sometimes you can get coached out of that. Like Xavier Rhodes from Florida State was a guy who was extremely handsy, and he was still handsy in Minnesota, but he was a great corner, and that's kind of the things that you weigh. So it sucks, but Terrion Arnold is no longer with the Detroit Lions, and man, it's just you look at the 2024 draft class and you go, you could have used a corner to really break free. Hopefully, it's Ennis Rakestraw. Hopefully, Christian Mahogany takes the guard. Hopefully, Giovanni Manu finds a spot. But for the most part, 2024 was a wash, and you could sit here all day long and poo-poo it or get pissed about it, but it happens. It's just the way of the NFL, and you don't see these things coming though. Like on the field, Terrion Arnold was average, right? Not what you expected out of a first round pick, but you don't expect this, where he's potentially facing life in prison. I know he had a good bond hearing today, but for the most part, you don't get a lot of chances like this, especially when you're a young kid. And I thought Junior Gillette had a really good tweet the other day. He says, someone should have took this young kid in and told me you can get insurance on your jewelry. You don't got to go vigilante justice, and that's kind of the moral of the story for Terrion Arnold and any young player that's entering the NFL. Be smart and have the right people around you. And I think Terrion Arnold did not have the right people around him, and he's no longer with the Detroit Lions. And we'll see if he can catch on somewhere else. But I have a feeling, just my opinion, but I think that the Lions got fed something from the NFL league office, and he's going to be on the commissioner exempt list for the entirety of the trial or something along those lines. And the Detroit Lions are like, no, we're not going to do this. So they made a decision. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they've been pretty good with their decisions, except for the 2024 draft. So this is the second cornerback that's faced legal troubles. You believe that? Second cornerback that has faced legal troubles. I don't know what kind of jinx the Detroit Lions have at the cornerback position, but Cam Sutton, Terrion Arnold, and then you look at the cornerbacks that are actively on the Detroit Lions roster, and obviously Arnold's not on the Lions roster anymore, but there's a lot of hope in some players. There's a lot of hope that they'll stay healthy, but it's a very thin, razor thin margin in terms of what they're able to do. Like I said yesterday, that was the defense. Arnold's issue really put down the Detroit Lions team. So it sucks, but when you look at this defense, there is reason to be excited. Obviously, defensive end. You hope Wanham or DJ, Moore could be good. Lee McNeil getting back to form. Tyleik Williams. You've got Jack Campbell, who's going to get the opposite side of Jack with the two, if they do two linebackers. And with the cornerbacks, it just says it right there. There are more questions than answers with the cornerback position. So there's nothing that we're going to figure out in this YouTube video, nothing. But Terrion Arnold's been released by the Detroit Lions, and it makes for an interesting start to training camp in less than a month, which will be in a month. Yeah, I think they forget the dates, but late July that they're going to go to training camp. So this decision wasn't made easy. This decision was obviously shocking to some Detroit Lions fans who were following the trial and following the bond hearing. Well, they really didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see what happens with Terrion Arnold. Obviously, with the Detroit Lions, who do they go after? They go after Kenny Moore, Rasul Douglas. They go after Dory Jackson. There's a lot of cornerbacks available right now, so Detroit can do some things like that. Are they going to make a trade for Denzel Ward? No. You know, the reality is some of these teams they're not going to part with their number one corners. The number one corner is by far the hardest position to get in football. So when you have failures, when you have picks that don't work out, this is one of the hardest positions to really scout, especially with the way that it's officiated in college football and the way it's officiated in the NFL. It's completely different. You know, you see good corners in the NFL that were not great corners in college, and you see great corners in college that never materialized to be good corners in the NFL. So strange to break news like this, but you kind of had a feeling this was coming, and hopefully the Detroit Lions make some roster moves pretty soon to establish this. We'll see you guys next time on the Detroit Lions News Podcast. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.